All right, we're live. Midday stream. Wanted to do this one to get it out of the way so that everything else that happens after this makes sense. Um, the title's pretty self-explanatory. I'm starting over. Um, and it's not really by choice, but it's something that needed to happen. So the long boxing while black brand has kind of gone where I put it. And now it's time to actually hit the refresh button on this thing. And I'll tell you exactly the story behind what happened. I'm going to go ahead and roll the intro and then we can get to chopping this fable afterwards. Welcome back to Blurting While Dad. So let's get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. Before I jump too far into the starting over, part of the rebrand is going to be talking about some parenting things. And the first thing I have up, I'm writing it actually. I'm actually sitting down and scripting this one out a little bit so that I can make it so I can have a pretty in-depth conversation about it. It's going to be parenting with ADHD. And so that's going to be the next blurting while dad is going to be talking about my journey. I always had ADHD. It wasn't like some magical thing that I was diagnosed with as an adult. I kind of knew it when I was a kid, but getting the official diagnosis as an adult kind of helped me out and um, helped me from it really going to a dark place where I was because I could not for the life of me figure out what was going on with my brain. And so that's the next episode. Let me know if y'all are interested in that one, and just talk about my journey with it and how it ties into what kind of parent I am right now. But I think that's an important conversation to have because I think a lot of times when we talk about ADHD, ends up becoming something that we just described a childhood and don't really talk about it, how it affects the adults who end up having kids of their own and how they struggle from time to time. So that's the next thing I'm working on. But today's episode is going to be talking about starting over. Um, so basically, when I started long boxing while black, I was managing social workers, and I'm like, I want to start a website where I talk about comic books. And that's where it started, 2015. I'm like, I want to build a website. And I built a website, and then I'm like, let's talk about comic books on it. So I'm talking about comic books. I'm like, let's put a unique spin on it. And instead of reviewing comic books, because I didn't exactly have the time to do that, I read a lot of stuff, but I didn't have time to review everything I read. I wanted to talk about characters and reviewing the character arcs of these different characters in comic books. And a lot of it started with this is why Batman sucks. And so that's why you see me joking about pro Batman slander and stuff like that, because that's really the first thing I really did. I talked about Batman, I talked about my problems with Jason Todd, and I called it character issues. And I kind of laid out my issues with the character and how to improve them. And so that's where long boxing while black started. Um, did it for a while, got a little bit of scratch together, paid for an official logo, and I was up and running. Now, once I got up and running, I was chugging along. I had my days where I'll be writing on Saturdays and Sundays to kind of try to push things out on Monday. I wasn't doing video or anything along those lines. It was all written. And then I changed my job. And my weekends went from, me doing website work and writing articles to me handling problems from my 24-hour staff. And I really didn't have time. And so a lot of stuff went by the wayside, went by the back burner. And then in that path, I also lost my mom. And so one of the things is when you lose a parent, especially if it's kind of an unexpected thing, a lot of things that used to be super important to you end up losing their sense of priority. And that's what happened to the website. And it just kind of became this thing out there that I would reference, but I didn't exactly do a heck of a whole lot with. I wanted to do a YouTube channel because I figured it was simpler to kind of shoot video and put stuff out there. But then I realized that Video has its own level of editing that's really time consuming. And it just kind of became this entity out there where I'd occasionally post an article here or there and reference back to it and drive traffic to it, but I didn't really maintain it. And it kind of existed in this zombie state for a couple of years. Um, I was really proud of a lot of the writings I put in there because I was really kind of trying, I was really finding my voice. Some of the things, I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly the happiest with in terms of the way I use the words and all that other stuff, but I was happy about what I was writing. Um, One even got me, and it's kind of the article that got me to shut things down right before my mom passed was, um, talking about what the comic books basically in the times of in the age of Black Lives Matter and how these things are going to intersect because I was coming at it from in comic books we didn't really have a sense of black community. We have black characters, but most of the time the black characters were only shown in reference to interacting with white characters, and we didn't really see a sense of community. There was one that was really interesting that caught my eye was the marriage of Black Panther and Storm, and I'm gonna try to keep the character straight in my mind. I'm sorry if I screw this up because it's off the top of the dome. Um, but there's a passage where they have the marriage of Black Panther and Storm, and all the heroes are in attendance, and they made sure to invite all the black heroes and the white heroes they were cool with. And there was a bunch of black heroes who were in attendance that were icons in the black Marvel community that the white um the white characters had no idea who they were. And it was kind of a dope thing, and it was playing into the red, white, and black Captain America book, where they talked about the original black Captain America. Most recently, you saw that on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You saw that actually played out, which was really exciting to see how that worked. But it talked about the legacy of the Captain America um, moniker and talked about how Steve Rogers wasn't the first one. And they had one of the black Captain Americas in attendance, and all the reference that the black characters are given because he was one of the OGs of the superhero game, and they had Wolverine sitting there who didn't have any clue who this person was. So it was kind of spawned by reading that and seeing the sense of black community or lack thereof in comic books and talking about how do comic books tackle um, these communities, because in the comic book world there's the superhero community and then there's the mutant community, there's the inhuman community, but they want to talk about some of these racial issues but not talk about them. And so the interplay between the black characters is really super surface level, where realistically when you are one of a few black folks in a space that's surrounded by white folks, you tend to kind of drift together a little bit and have some inside baseball things that are specifically unique to your experience, you know. And I'm talking about getting on the granular level, like, seeing a black character in this white world. Where do they get their haircut? What church do they go to? Where do they hang around? What do they do in their off time? You know, those kind of things, because there's a social element too, where we tend to socialize with each other when we see each other, and there's specific things that occur between black folks, when they're surrounded by a bunch of white folks, and there's a certain beat that was missing in comic books, because a lot of the people writing the comic books, even in their best, they wanted to showcase these black characters, but they didn't have any sense of community around it. There was no black community in Marvel, if that makes sense. Leave a comment if that makes sense. um and that's what the article was about. Well, that article spawned, because I posted it and I got a little bit of response and actually boosted it on Facebook. And it got a vitriolic response where I was getting death threats, and people were threatening me and threatening my wife and kids. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I put Black Lives Matter, in the age of comic books or something along those lines, or comic books in the age of Black Lives Matter. And they latched onto the title but didn't read the article, which is a phenomenon that a lot of writers are experiencing when they post articles online. And the vitriolic response, initially I was used to, it was funny, and ha ha jokey until it started getting, the death threats and stuff. And I'm like, okay, some of these people are unhinged. And you never know what nut is going to latch on to something that you post on there, and they form some kind of weird relationship with you, some parasocial relationship where they actually want to hurt you. And so that got me off of writing. And then my mom passed, and I'm like, all right, let me put this thing down for a while. And I revisited it a couple of times. Wrote an article about grief and my kind of journey with that, and me trying to get back into the writing thing. And then another one where I just kind of got overwhelmed with frustration because I was getting back into the nerd stuff and, kind of emerging from the cocoon that I wrapped myself in with grief. Sitting there watching WWE. And I'm like, this is so stupid that I have to write an article about it. Um, but overall, the website was kind of this entity out there. And I was never exactly thrilled with how it came out. The formatting thing, I didn't have any money to spend on it. So it was all WordPress. I didn't really like the format. I couldn't find a format that I was happy with. And it felt like the entire blogging thing was going by the wayside for video content, and I was trying to figure out a way to integrate more video content into it, but then I realized video content was just as time consuming. So anyway, let's fast forward. So now, a couple days ago, I did a live stream and I referenced the website, and I went to check on the website, and the website's gone. And I realized that um, my hosting got suspended, which isn't a big deal. It's happened before at times where I didn't have any money to pay for it, and the website wasn't. It was a hobby, so it wasn't generating money by itself. I had to put money into it to make it work. Well, it got taken down, and a lot of the files that were on that website are gone now. So a lot of the writings that I put in on that website don't exist anymore. So now I'm starting over. Some of the stuff I've written, I actually um, had it where it was synced to Medium. So I have some of the articles that I've written when I was really kind of in my groove that are still saved. But overall, I'm starting from scratch with the website. And so I'm figuring out what a Blurting While Dad website looks like versus what just a Long Boxing While Black website looks like. And that's the hard part, because I didn't think I would actually feel emotional about losing it, because the website wasn't anything that I was putting a ton of energy into, but it was kind of a warehouse of where I was. It was kind of a time capsule of where I was 5 and 6 years ago. And where I was 5 and 6 years ago was kind of a mixed bag of experiences, um, some highs and some lows, and some me really trying to get in the front door of this blogging thing and kind of figure out how I make this blogging site into something big. Um, and I'm starting to see the lurch away from the straight up blogging sites. A lot of the bloggers are moving towards are really moving towards video content and things like that. And that's something I always wanted to do anyway. I wanted to get back into producing actual content as opposed to just being a writer, but I do miss the writing element. And so it's figuring out what this thing looks like. um I want to make Blurting While Dad something that is for a specific niche of Black parents who are also into sci-fi and comic books and wrestling and all the other stuff, blurs, if you will. But I also want to have a place for Black parent, a resource for Black parents to go to, where we have some real honest conversations about struggling as a parent. That's where I'm at. So it's figuring out what that combination is going to look like, and hopefully y'all stick around to kind of see where this thing goes, because I think it's going to be interesting. Um, but I'm gonna be a lot more mindful of the stuff I put out there. Um, and I'm going to revisit some of the old stuff, because I do think character issues does have a place in the Blurting While Dad landscape, because most of my nerdum, if you will, most of my nerdy interests do revolve around comic books, and I've always found the concept of being black in a comic book really kind of an interesting thing, because specifically in a if you're a black superhero on a comic book, you're kind of a double minority. And if you're a black woman in a comic book who's a superhero, you're a triple minority. And it goes on as you get into further marginalized groups that interact with black folks or intersect with blackness, you're going to have quadruple minorities, and seeing what their sense of community is in comics and giving voice to some of the tropes and things and pulling things apart. So I'm really interested in revisiting some of the old character issues articles and turning those into YouTube videos. But I also want to talk about some parenting stuff, specifically that's for black parents, and talk about some nerd stuff that's for black parents and all that other stuff, and our adventures with having kids that have similar interests. Um, so and supporting them. But like I said, the next video is going to be is good. The next video I'm gonna do after I post this starting over video and cut it down and get it ready for a podcast is gonna be, being a black parent with ADHD, because that's a real unique subgroup. And so um I can pivot a little bit into talking, framing that out a little bit, and why I'm focusing on black parents with ADHD, because I think ADHD for black folks, um, you know, for specific communities, it's a diagnosis that leads to help. Other communities, it's a diagnosis that leads to jail and unemployment and all kinds of other things, because um, it's about how you're viewed. So I want to have that kind of conversation and talk about, because there's a good chance that one of my kids or both of my kids have ADHD, and it kind of, my life, the way it shakes out the same way it shook out for me, where it wasn't one of those things that was distracting me and keeping me from making my grades most of the time. I was still smart enough to get enough so that I could maintain A or B average, but or one or two average, depending on where you live. But it was enough to, once I had to actually buckle down and focus and concentrate on things, it made my life very, very difficult. Made my academic life a lot harder once I had to actually start paying attention. So anyway, I do want to do that video. That video is coming up next, but I wanted to get that out of there. And it's kind of an emotional thing. Losing a lot of my writings. Um, I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I feel this sense of loss, like a real sense of loss. But at the same time, it's refreshing because I'm not handcuffed to the I'm not handcuffed to the long boxing while black format. I might even take it, instead of doing it, because I was hosting on WordPress and doing all that stuff. I might take it over to Squarespace and see how that goes. I might take it somewhere else, take it to another content management system and see where that goes and see what I'm able to do with that, and take a lot of the overhead out of managing a website. Because I like the flexibility I was getting with WordPress, but a lot of the oversight of management was a pain in the ass. And so, and that took up a lot of time. So I don't know where this goes, but I'm just letting you know that I'm starting over. And so any old references to the website, you're gonna go and probably see a blank under construction page, because I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I'm gonna do something with it. And it's going to be rebranded as Blurting Wild Dad. Um, because that's the direction I want to head. So that's what I got. Thanks for the few that tuned in. We'll be doing another live stream here probably tomorrow about something. We'll see what happens. But thanks for tuning in. Again, this is Brian with Blurting Wild Dad. I'll holla at y'all later. Peace.